Once you've got your player controller set up in Unreal, it's time to bring in the assets you'll place in for your visualization. In a typical workflow, we'll make these assets in another program, constructing our meshes, for example, in 3ds Max or Maya or even Revit. We'll make our textures in Photoshop and Illustrator, maybe using the Quixel Suite or XNormal or a similar exporter for different specialty maps we're going to need. We'll take all that content and import it into Unreal. I'm going to bring up the building we're going to import in Autodesk Maya for a minute and take a look at the different parts and look over exporting things out. I'm here in Autodesk Maya, and I've opened up the H. Smith Building Maya file from the Chapter 1 Exercise Files MO1 project. That's a working Maya project with a scenes directory containing this building and several other meshes, and an exports directory with all the different FBXs I'm going to bring in. What I did here is to model this building as I want it to be presented. It's a 2-story office building, and it's got an arched roof supported by, we'll assume, wood trusses or something similar, brick exterior walls, and at some point later, there was this louver added on. Later remodels have also put in the slate front walkway and steps, and the brick cladding around the conference room. What I've done is to organize here in Maya by layers, being able to turn off and on, for example, the exterior shell and get to the inside, and so forth. For the export then, I'm going to export out pieces thinking through their collision volumes, and am I going to replace them with a blueprint. For example, I exported out these front steps as one object. The shapes are fairly simple, so I want to use a mesh collider on this so you can actually collide with, or walk on, all the different parts. I brought out the railing separately, as that one really doesn't merit a mesh collider, but rather a box that fits nicely around it. The same goes for the front windows. As long as these generally fit into a box, the whole lot of them, we can put one collider on and optimize a little bit of what we're doing. So the big deal in the export then is to bring out the different pieces either for where their pivot needs to be at 0, 0, or as different pieces for setting their collision volumes if you're not using a mesh collider. I'll jump back into Unreal then and show what the import looks like on these different objects. Here in Unreal, down in the Content browser, I'll import in by clicking on the Import button, or right-clicking and choosing Import to Game. In the Import dialog then, I browsed into the Exercise Files Chapter 1 MO1 Maya project, into the Scenes directory, and into Exports. And we can see all the different named FBXs I've put in there. There's the ceilings, the doors, the dirt for the entry, the elevators, flooring, and so on, all the way down. There's even a standard office desk, louvers that are the front, the sidewalk, and all the signage for all the different rooms. What I'll do is pick just about everything to come in. I'll scroll up, select Ceiling Conference FBX, and scroll all the way down to the end, and pick Windows, holding Shift. This way I select the whole lot. What we can see in here is that these are all separated out roughly by where their colliders need to go. I did this also because bringing the whole building at once into Unreal might cause some minor import issues, like crashing. And so I decided to bring it out as pieces, testing them along the way to make sure it would import solidly. Most of these pieces will be simply brought in and placed and will be done. Some of them, like the doors for example, we can see a door frame, door left, and door right, I've zeroed out so that we can animate these as part of a blueprint. Doors interior then will get eventually replaced with animated doors. I'll click Open, and this pulls up the FBX Options Import dialog. And in here we can see different things. Auto-generating collision meshes, for example. Importing the transforms and making sure that the translation is coming in as needed. Importing materials and textures. And if we show the advanced on this, we can also see that we can remove degenerates, for example, and generate light map UVs. Generating a second set of UVs so that when we bake our lighting, we can actually have that in there on the model plus the UVs of the original texture. I'll make sure those are checked then, and I'm going to turn off Auto-Generate Collision. We've got some different options in here, but I'd rather have things come in with no collision volumes on them and decide for each one. It'll take a little time, but it'll help me optimize nicely. Once I've got this in, I'll roll up Hide Advanced and import all. We may see and hear some issues like this. Sealing lobby as degenerate tangent bases, which will result in incorrect shading. This could be a function of the export, depending on which flavor of FBX you're using. You can also try OBJ, but these models seem to work pretty nicely like this, so I'm going to ignore that error. I'll click OK and let it go through the rest of the import. My objects have all imported in, and we can see Unreal is now saving the assets, the U asset, and then also making sure that the textures come in, the materials, and generating thumbnails. There were probably 6 or 8 more times I had to click OK to a degenerate tangent message, but that's okay. Again, if you're having issues, check how your normals are working. Do you have odd-shaped faces or hidden edges that are causing funny artifacts on those models? And you can also bring it out as an OBJ if you need, and usually eliminate some of those issues. All of my pieces have imported in. What's happened here is that Unreal has also brought in the textures associated with those materials if they're a blend, a standard Maya material, for example. What we can see here is it generated thumbnails for each one, and each one can then show us, as we mouse over, for example, where it is, the number of triangles, verts, and so forth, and the UV channels used. This did take a couple of minutes, so if you want to minimize that, you can bring in some objects now and place them, and some later. But I chose to take the time hit and bring in those pieces. And now I'm going to do a little bit of organization. What we can see here is we have a bunch of different things going on. There's our meshes, such as the ceiling for the conference room. There's the carpet, which I've called Speedway. There's some different textures, the ceiling tiles and so forth, and other materials and things scattered throughout. What I'll do is use my filters here, dropping down and choosing, for example, materials. This filters down to just the materials, and I'll make a folder, right-clicking and choosing New Folder in the Content section, and calling it Materials. Now I'll click back on Content. There's all the materials, and I'll select them, picking one, holding Shift and picking the bottom, and I'll pull them into the Materials folder. I'll move them here, and it'll move them over, saving the assets again. I'll repeat this with the meshes and the textures, so I've got things a bit more organized. We can even go further and make, for example, subfolders for floors, ceilings, and so forth. Now what I'll do is change my filter back from material, for example, to static meshes. And there's all the different meshes. Again, I'll make a folder, adding a new folder, and calling this new folder Meshes. I'll put my meshes in, and finally finish up the textures. It's worth a little bit of setup, because that way you can get everything in, ready to place, get the materials going, and get your whole scene kind of ready to run around so you can start proofing it quickly and finding issues if there are any. I'll filter one more time here for textures. In this case, those are just textures remaining, and I'll drag them into that textures folder. Now that I've got everything imported, I can start to think about optimizing colliders and setting colliders on a lot of different things, optimizing and configuring my materials a bit, and then getting it actually into the scene and beginning my lighting.